Hello folks, Dave with URAL Motorcycles. Hey, today I'm going to address some questions and concerns that came up after we posted the 2022 intro video. But before I get started, I also want to remind you, if you have follow-up questions and you haven't received an answer in the comments section, either here or on other social media platforms, please don't be nervous about reaching out to a dealer for answers. If it's not a dealer local to you, you can still call them. Our dealers are the front line of the URAL brand, and many of our dealers have years and years of hands-on experience with these machines. Heck, even some of the dealers I used to rely on for answers when I was a newbie 14 years ago, they're still around and they're willing to help you out even on the phone. So, and of course, you can still reach out to us if you want. You can email us here at info@ural.com. But with our small crew, oftentimes you'll get a faster response from one of our dealers. Okay, so let's start with premium fuel. As I was lurking on the forums and some groups and comment sections, it got me thinking. I know many of these folks have older URALs because it's in their profile, or they post pictures of the bike on a thread. So the frame of reference on some of the comments that I was getting on the video was probably related to carburetor models, and they don't realize how much has changed. Well, it got me thinking and also a little curious. So I did a deep dive to see what has been published about premium fuel from URAL over the past years. So what I found was 91 octane fuel has been recommended for some time. In fact, I had to go all the way back to the previous importer's owner's manual from 2000 to 2002. Look at this thing. It's ancient. So yeah, all the way back to 2002 to find anything that supported the use of lower octane fuel. So like I said in 2022 intro video, it was recommended before, since 2003 in fact. You just had an easier time, I had an easier time using lower octane fuel due to the lower compression, the timing, the amount of fuel we were able to put into the system back then and still pass emissions. So the recommendation either from URAL or another OEM has a reason. And when you're talking about internal combustion engines in cars, trucks, motorcycles, what have you, every avenue to passing modern day certification requirements usually produces heat. As I said in the last video, URAL upped the compression for 2022. Increasing compression is normally associated with increased power. For URAL, that wasn't quite the purpose behind the new pistons. It was to achieve a more complete burn of the fuel. Manufacturers pretty much have to take away fuel, effectively leaning out the system. If more fuel could be added while still passing emissions requirements, it would actually reduce heat. More fuel decreases the heat. Increasing compression would typically increase performance gains if all the other factors remain the same, like in the amount of the fuel supplied to the motor. But when you increase compression and remove fuel or lean out the system, you achieve reduced fuel consumption, but it's often a wash, and any increase in power is kind of neutralized because you're adding one thing but taking something else away. But that increased compression typically results in a more complete burn of the fuel in the cylinder, which leads to less unburnt fuel in the tailpipe, which leads to a reduction in all the things that test going into the atmosphere. I'm going to put this chart up on the screen. And now this shows how heat goes up as a function increased by compression, and this is just generated by compression. This is also why our new exhaust system has 4 cats. So in addition to what's being combusted in the chamber, it also scrubs everything twice as much going out of the system, because now we have a pre-cat and a middle cat on each side. 4 catalytic converters. So to recap here, you reduce the system's use of fuel, you increase the compression so you can burn as much of that fuel that you can put in there, which is, we just went over, this increases the heat. With the increased heat, there's more chance for pre-detonation. What you and I would hear or know commonly as pinging. This is why some motorcycle manufacturers have gone to water-cooled to keep the heat down. URAL still remains air-cooled, and URAL was able to do this with modern materials like the pistons we talked about in the last video, and incorporating some of the most advanced software and sophisticated protection available in the ECU. In fact, the level of protection has increased even compared to 2021. It's very aggressive protection. So if you run the bike too hard for too long, the check engine light would come on, and the programming would reduce the power to reduce the impact on the engine components. Now, if you continue to hammer on the bike after that, well, yeah, something unpleasant could happen. Now, I myself have traveled all over the US, and I understand if you aren't on a main interstate, your choices for fuel may be limited. So I get it, I've been there myself, okay? If you can't find the recommended octane, it doesn't mean you have to park your bike. It doesn't mean you can't use your bike. If you have no choice but to run lower octane fuel and you're throttling up a hill and you start to hear a little pinging, just roll back on the throttle a little bit or kick down a gear into a more favorable ratio for the engine to handle. Think of it this way. If you follow the same guidelines that are in your owner's manual and the best loading practices video that I made before, treat the bike in the same way you would if you had a headwind and you had two fairings on the bike. Or if you had a heavy payload and you're riding in high ambient temperature like in the Southwest. Reduce your speed, take longer breaks at fill-ups, watch the video on the best loading practices. I did cover some of it in there. Or read the section in your owner's manual. This is right from, I'll put this up on the screen too. This is right from our owner's manual from section 3, page 6. It says, when planning for a ride, consider a few factors before choosing your route. What is the ambient temperature? Will I have a passenger or additional payload? What is the best route for the speed I will be able to maintain? Keep in mind how maintain high rates of speed, carrying additional cargo can affect the temperature of the motor. Okay? If you don't have an owner's manual, you can read it online at imz-ural.com. Under the support tab, it'll drop down and you can, at the top of the page, and you can select an owner's manual to read. What I'm getting at here is use the best tool you have at your disposal, your brain and some common sense. Based on what you're feeling, you're hearing, and how warm you are. If you're warm, you know the motor's going to be hot. So if you want to further monitor and have eyes on your engine status, we do have the Gen 2 Diagnostic Tool. You can monitor all kinds of engine data, including engine temperature and RPM, with the Bluetooth using the URAL OBD app on your phone, which is available for iPhone and Android. I finally got to try it out for myself, and it was pretty cool to have all that information there. Here you can see a little bit of my ride when I was trying it out, and I apologize for the shaky camera. I was trying to get the phone. I should have just screen recorded what was on the phone, but I was trying to capture it with my action camera. And primarily I was just looking at RPM and engine temp, but I gotta say it was pretty cool to be able to do that. Now, for those of you who can get premium fuel, but you're bothered about the extra cost of ownership, and I saw this too, or touched on out there on the internet, or those of you who can only get low octane fuel, but some people talked about spiking it with an octane booster. Now, yeah, that's gonna run you a few extra bucks with each fill up, and it might seem like the cost of operation for a 2022 just went up over previous years. So what I ask you to consider is the increased fuel economy of the 2022 and the newer engines. Yes, it may cost more initially at the fill up with premium fuel or to buy a bottle of octane booster or whatever you're doing, but you're going to get better fuel economy than the older URAL, and you're going to go farther and fill up less often. So the cost difference in running lower octane fuel is going to most likely be minimal with the current fuel efficiency compared to the older models. And that's just some food for thought. Okay, so enough of the premium fuel and the heat and all that kind of thing. hopefully that answers most of your questions. So let's go on to the kickstand, which is probably the second most asked about. No, the third most asked about. Will the kickstand fit onto the older bikes? No, I'm sorry. It will not retrofit to the older models. It will interfere with the low exhaust pipes because it's got this little kick out on it now that would interfere with the old pontoon style. Now the design will not fit GPR either. So the current GPR system will only fit 2016 up to 2021 models. So I know you're going to ask, and I already did. Will there be a new GPR system? That's a good question. And yeah, I asked, and I haven't got an answer yet, so stay tuned on that one. I don't have a return reply on that yet. So will the stock 2022 2-in-1, the system that's on this bike from the factory, will that fit the older bikes? Sorry again, no, it will not fit older bikes because of the rubber isolator that holds the pipe is right in the way where it's exactly where the old kickstand used to mount. So the little mount that's up there now is actually a rubber isolator. And here, I got an example here. So this little pin sits on a rubber isolator, helps with vibration. And it's right where the old center stand pivot is located on the older bikes. So it's right in the way. Even removing the old kickstand, there would still be obstacles with the old pivot point. Which leads us to the same pipe, but the CT model. Will the stock 2022 2-in-1 be standard on the CT? Yes, it will be. The older pontoon style low pipes will not be available as they can't be used with the new programming and other changes for 2022. Remember what I was saying earlier about the 4 cats and scrubbing the air and all that stuff for the new certification requirements? Yeah, the old exhaust system can't be used for emissions, and it will not fit because the kickstand kick-out thing that I was talking about just a second ago. To further demonstrate here, just to show you. So here's the old GPR. You can see how the Y pipe or mid pipe comes together here, and then it mounts off the old foot peg, off the foot peg. And here's the new 2022 version, and it comes in like this, and it's supported right where the old kickstand goes, and then the new kickstand actually shrouds around that. And then it's got this part here to help gain leverage to lift the bike up. So the route this one takes, it kind of eliminates the possibility of using the old GPR and vice versa using this on an older bike. Okay, so another question. Can I carry a passenger, or is the exhaust going to be too hot? Because now we're literally saying on CT and Gear Up, it's going to have the 2-in-1 high pipe. Yes, you can carry a passenger. You and your passenger should be fine, as well as the fuel canister, which came up as well. The muffler with the clearance to the fuel canister. A few people asked about that too. So the heat shields do a great job, and the fuel canister is not getting hot with a little bit of room between the exhaust and the jerry can. It seemed to be enough to get some air through there, and it kept things from heating up. So I went through for a little ride. It was about 45 minutes or so, definitely long enough to get up to operating temperature and beyond. I went on the freeway, back roads, everything. It was about 83 degrees Fahrenheit that day. So I'm going to put a little video up here on the screen, and everything you're going to see here is I rode around for 45 minutes. I came back. I didn't shut off the bike. I left it idling. And then I took the little laser heat gun and I hit several spots, including the heat shields and the jerry can. And all the numbers you're going to see here on the screen, those are all Celsius. So you'll have to convert those if you want to find out what they are in Fahrenheit. But, and then you'll see that I was able to put my hands, my bare hands, ungloved bare hands on the heat shields and touch the jerry can, it was cool to the touch. After 45 minutes, like I said, 83 degrees Fahrenheit. Here at the end, you can see the temperature on the bike, the engine temperature. So yeah, it'll be perfectly safe as long as you're not, you know, messing around or anything, getting your hand up under the heat shield. You or a passenger should be fine, and your jerry can is not going to blow up. Okay, this one was a big one too. This came up a lot. Rear brake. Yes, it will fit bikes that were equipped with free-wheel disc brakes. So from 2014 up to current, you would have to contact your dealer though and buy the parts individually. There will not be a conversion kit, is what I was told. What you'd be looking at is the caliper, the parking brake caliper, the new spacer for the change in rotors, because the rotor has more buttons and it's a little bit thicker, supposed to be for increased braking and longevity. So that new rotor requires a new adapter to go onto the old hub. The new parking brake cable for the parking brake caliper, which is now independent of the rear brake. Easier adjustment. You can actually, as I showed on the other video, you can actually make adjustments with your fingers, no longer need a tool. And then the caliper has a slightly shorter brake line, so you would probably want to get that as well, so you didn't have a bunch of access flopping around. And then the brake bracket, the front fork. Yes, it is retrofittable with all 2014 and newer models with the aluminum triple trees. You would have to contact your dealer again and buy the parts individually, just like the rear brake setup. It would require you to purchase both fork legs, which I have right here, and I have them because I am spoiled and I have to retrofit this bike. The swing arm, look at this, is beautiful. This is the first new one I've seen. There will not be a retrofit kit for this either, so I've been told. But yeah, both fork legs, the swing arm, any related hardware, and the axle, because the axle has changed too. Again, it's reverse thread. Big 10mm Allen goes in there to hold the axle. And then this is what goes in the swing arm now and secures the other side. Knobby tires. So the hide now knobbies are going to be standard. Why? Well, like the new standard 2-in-1 high pipe for ground clearance, on-demand two-wheel drive, which we've had forever, etc. All those kind of things. Ural, as you know, is primarily designed as a bike that was made for the road less traveled, right? So the GEAR UP is our best-selling model. So most of our development and investment is driven towards that model. So we see our customers always adding knobby tires. We make them standard. People want a 2-in-1 high pipe, as is the case with the GPR and other versions prior to it. So we make it standard, but we have to make it standard that will pass emissions. So with the year-over-year changes and new regulations and so on, I mean, we still try and stay within this unique formula that has always made Ural what it is. It does have the ability to travel highways, given you follow the recommendations for your conditions and your payload. So that's going to wrap up this video. I know it will cause more questions, and we will try to address those in the future, maybe in another video, maybe in writing, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. It's been getting pretty busy. I thank you for watching. Please be safe and take care.